everybody. As you can hear, we're recording this meeting, and hopefully we will have it upload in our website and in the association website as well. And we'll put a copy of the video in our YouTube channel so that people that were not able to attend or want to revisit some of the information that we will be sharing today can also access it. So I say welcome to our virtual Apple Summer Field Day, part 1, because as I've heard, there will be a second part or more speakers to come in the following weeks with other meetings. Today, the main topic that we're going to cover is about summer pruning, and we're also going to talk a little bit about irrigation. And I want to thank and introduce our panelists of today. We have Steve Louis with Oakwood Fruit Farm that has graciously recorded some videos of his irrigation setting that he will share with us. We also have Laura Tisch from Munch's Apples Orchard. Laura recorded a video of her mechanical hedger, and she will be sharing that with us. And we also have Joe Ferguson from Ferguson's Orchard, and Joe also did a summer pruning for multi-liter trees video, and he also recorded irrigation video for us, sharing what they're doing at their orchards. So with that, I want to say that everybody's muted and have no video so that we don't have extra noise. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box that you can find on the bottom. There's a menu, and on the right side, there should be something that says chat. You can find there. You can click on there and you can send us your questions, and we'll be addressing those questions. We'll leave some time to answer all of those questions at the end of the first period, in which we're going to be talking about summer pruning. So with that, I'll start with a little introduction about summer pruning. And I specifically want to talk about mechanical summer pruning. And this is possible because of our dwarfing rootstocks that we have and the new high density systems that we have that allow us to control the vigor of these trees and allow us as well to be able to do these more mechanized techniques that we can implement with these new orchards. And the goal of this mechanical summer pruning is to transform these more conical trees that we used to have into what is called the fruiting walls. So these fruiting walls that tend to be a lot more narrow, between 2 to 4 feet, wider on the base and narrower on the top of the tree canopy. That's the goal, or what is being referred by a lot of the extension groups that work on apple production of these going into this 2D, from a 3D tree to a 2D tree. So that's what we refer to this fruiting wall. And some of the benefits of this summer pruning is to increase the light penetration in the canopy. So increased light inside, this helps with color development, increases fruit color development, but also helps with flower induction for the following year. Another advantage of using this mechanical summer pruning is that it helps also mechanize other labors, such as harvest. So with this mechanical summer pruning, in which the canopy is much narrower, using mechanization of harvest, using some of these platforms to harvest, make it so much easier to go through harvesting a lot of acres in a faster way. And it also reduces the cost of the dormant pruning because you're sort of doing some of the job during the summer. So those are the main reasons why we're introducing this mechanical summer pruning. And our panelists that are participating today, some of them implement this mechanical summer pruning. And what I want to show now is a video that Laura Tisch from Munch's Apple shared with us of her doing some mechanical summer pruning. And then I want to ask some questions to all of the panelists when we're done with the video, and I will be happy to answer some of the questions about this. So I'll stop sharing this screen right now, and I'll go and share the video that we have, and hopefully everybody will be able to watch the video, but we will also have this video up in YouTube, in our YouTube channel, in case you are not able to watch it right now as we stream it. So let me share this new screen with you. And so here's this video.
Allow for more mechanization and have better exposure and an increase in fruit quality. When it comes to reducing labor, I've noticed a huge difference in pruning. In the winter, when we prune, we're just taking out large limbs, so anything 3/4 of an inch or more. I've definitely noticed less time that we have to spend on pruning. It can reduce your hand thinning. Harvest is easier because you're keeping a narrower tree canopy and everything's just kind of at reach, and you're trying to create a more standard tree space, so everything's more uniform throughout your orchard. So now then, if you're adding anything mechanical like a picking machine, platform machines, it makes everything easier. And then because you're keeping those trees more exposed, you're increasing the light. And so of course, then you're gonna have better colored fruit, which leads to a higher quality apple in the end. A lot of times, the width of your tree that you're making is really dependent on you. A lot of times they do, the top is around 8 to 12 inches from the center of the trunk out, and then the bottom is more around 15 to 20 inches. Times when you want to hedge can be winter. In Wisconsin, the best time is at the end of winter when you've kind of gotten past a lot of some deep freezes. Or the next time is at 10 to 12 leaves. And at this time, you're kind of just tipping the ends of the branches. And so you're kind of when you're tipping, promote fruit buds to be setting for the next year closer into your tree trunk, which is a great thing, especially for your tip bearer trees such as Fuji's or Cortlands. And then you can also hedge at pink. Post-harvest hedging, and when you do the post-harvest hedging, the best time to do it as soon as you're done getting the apples off the trees and there's still leaves on the trees, you can hedge. And that way when you go into winter, you can kind of more see what you need to do for pruning and clean things up. And you can also hedge at pre-harvest. The time to start hedging the trees as far as the age of the tree goes is 4th leaf, is what a lot of people do. This is my 2nd year with hedging. I've been very happy with it. I definitely have noticed the decrease in labor costs and an increase in the quality of my apples. It just has made everything easier. When you think about spraying and you're creating that more uniform tree, you're going to get better spray coverage.
All right, so that was the first video I was sharing with you. I hope that everybody got most of it. I know that we have some technical issues. This is the first time we're doing this. And now what I want to do is share the second video that is from Joe Ferguson, showing us how to do multi-liter tree summer pruning. And I'll, one moment, I'll share this one with you guys. And hopefully the audio would work just fine. Here we go.
All right, my name's Joe Ferguson. This is our orchard here in Galesville. These are multi-liter, they're dual-liter Premier Honeycrisp trees. These ones are on KJM 2s, and there's also some on M9s. You can see we also have a couple trees that are interplanted in here. Ones that we lost or were girdled by mice. So we're I'll show you how we attack summer pruning and what we look for when we're going about trying to shape a tree like this for summer hedging. I'm just going to do everything with the hand shears. So first, we'll look at this tree right here. Dual leaders. This one is a little bit less vigorous than the main leader. So we kind of want to focus on getting this side evened out. So what I'm going to do is make sure this side's cleared out and that we're at a good fresh terminal up here. So I'm going to look through, take any big branches out because I probably won't be worried about cropping this side mix here. I'll make sure any big petals are out. I looked up top. There's no struggle for leader growth. So we're clear for 1.5 to 2 feet that we are worried about in the upper third of our canopy. And then I move to the other side here. I see we have a couple of leaders up here that are in a battle. So I'll take those down. I'll start looking at any real big vertical growth that I'll take out or at least trim back. And then I want to start creating our fruiting wall. That's kind of the concept that we're going through in this block here. So usually I'm at around 8 inches. So anything outside of that 8 inches, I'm taking out. I'm not being too worrisome of where I'm cutting within the branch because during winter pruning, we're going to come back and hack that off. But I want to leave these longer ones to get into that second year wood to be able to fruit them. So I start looking at that. Now I start looking at my middle. Since this one is so much less vigorous than this side over here, I don't really have a battle for center space. I haven't filled anything. So I'm not too worried about cutting any of these branches that are coming this way. Maybe this one that starts overlapping here and clear off anything below my wire. So that's kind of how I attack that one. Now we move into where there's actually somewhat of a battle in here. I look up, I have a little battle for leader growth. So I make sure to attack that right away. Now I go outside and do my 8 inches in any vertical growth I'm taking off. Start coming down. I see I have a battle here. Since there's nothing here, I'm going to leave this one a little long. Keep going with my 8 inches down. And then I start looking here. Right now there's no battle right here, so I'm not too worried about that one. And I'll come with that one. So that's all we're trying to do is fill this void right here. I keep going down, look anything below my wire, and take that out. Keep moving, look up at the leaders. Some of these are getting pretty long, but we're at our height that we want, so I'm okay with leaving some. Move down, starting to have a little bit of a battle here, going like this. So I'm going to do my 8 inches and start clearing my center wall out. And start looking this way, where a lot of people would use mechanical hedging tool or equipment that they would come through and they would just make that 8-inch box right off the tree mechanically. I'm coming down, keep looking, still got some battles here right in the center. These are a little bit closer. You can tell this is a little bit wider span right here. So our branches, it doesn't really affect it. We're going to cut our branches shorter on this side, but they'll be longer on this side. So we just kind of look through. Orchard. We got our 8 inches coming down. And we take off anything that's too vertical. Reinvigorate that cut. Hopefully we get some new growth out of it. I'm looking, I got my space between, got my 8 inches, I got my leader support and my leader competition taken care of. And I'm looking, I got good clearance for my herbicide sprayer, and that's kind of the concept that we're going for.
All right, so those were the 2 videos that that we had about summer pruning, and I had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask Laura first. I know that the first part of the video, not everybody was able to listen because there were some issues with the audio there. But I wanted to ask Laura if she could tell us about her hedger and where she purchased it, and also when did she make the decision to use this hedger as mechanical summer pruning? When was the first time she used it, and how, since the first time, she's changed it the way that she's been using it, and the results that she's gotten out of it?
Okay, well, we bought, it's an Italian hedger, and we bought it from Bartlett in Ontario. And the first time we got it was actually at the end of the winter. So we used it at the end of March for the first time. So we had already gone through and kind of pruned the trees, but we knew we were going to hedge. So we kind of left some of the things that the hedger would do. And then we used it for the first time in the summer for the 10 to 12 leaves. And so from now on, I do the hedging at the end of harvest when there's still leaves on the trees. And then I do the summer hedge at the 10 to 12 leaves. Is that all you asked?
But one of the questions, what have you seen that, how has this mechanical summer hedging benefit? Have you seen substantial decrease in the amount of winter pruning, for example, that you do? Have you seen any effect on fruit color development? What was the main reason why you decided to implement this mechanical hedging?
I've just seen trees where they do the hedging and you can just see the quality of the apples and then just the ease of labor, And so I have seen where we've decreased, the amount the time that we're spending on pruning, and then also increased our quality where now you're getting better light, and so you're getting better color on your fruit. And also, I think when you're, figuring out how to spray your trees, you're keeping your trees more uniform. And so your spray coverage can be better.
Do you do different timings in the summer hedging for different cultivars?
No, I don't. I tend to, when I get the hedger out, I want to get it done and put it back again. So no, I haven't. I don't feel like I have that much of a variety in my trees that I have to make sure I do ones at different times than others.
Great.
I kind of I'm looking for a little bit of a dry spell. I don't want to do it when we're getting a lot of rain. So, just because of fire blight risk, I kind of wait for a little drier weather.
Do you see, how much regrowth do you see from these cuts in the summer?
Yeah, I think by the time you do your summer pruning, things have slowed down. You're not really going to see a lot of regrowth before harvest. I think if you did, that's why it's okay if you still want to before harvest, if you're worried about color, do it again, but I've never felt like I needed to. I mean, I think the thing of it too, and I think that's the thing with having, the high intensity orchards, is that we are exposing the fruit more, which is great for fruit quality. But if you have a hailstorm, you've exposed your fruit more, and so more damage that way.
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody that you can type your questions in the chat box. We have one question here that says, do you use the top bar of hedger to manage tree height?
I have. I have done it to some galas, which are really vigorous. Even have some Macintosh just to keep the height of the tree where I want it to be. And I've only done that. I only do that for the before winter pruning, the winter pruning. I don't do the summer one of that with the top bar.
Great. Steve Louis, I know that you also have done some mechanical hedging summer and also winter. Would you share with us your experience with it and your type of equipment that you're using?
Yeah, we did almost our whole all our high density and some of our medium density stuff last winter. We've got a Phil Brown hedger. It worked great. We actually had done some blocks high density that are like 6 and 7 years old that hadn't, had been pruned normally, but hadn't been hedged, so they hadn't really had that box set. And there was some quite a bit of cutting out there. And we were worried about what kind of regrowth we would get with, doing that much cutting all at once. And we've been extremely pleased with how little, we got some regrowth, but it's normal regrowth. Like if you did just a normal cut and then want a renewal shoot, we were worried we were going to get a bunch of, we always call it witch's broom or crow's feet, 3 and 4 coming from those stubs. And we have seen very, very little of that. We're very, very happy with how it's turned out. You can just instantly see the difference in the amount of light coming through. When we decided that this was what we were going to do, where it really hit me was on IFTA convention stop, and they had some little bit lower density trees. I think they were like 6 feet apart and about 14-foot row spacing. And those trees had gotten big enough that they were shading themselves, not just the fruit, but the fruit buds started climbing higher and higher in the tree. So they were starting to get like 70% of their crop wanting to in the top part of the tree where the light was. And by going to hedging, they were able to move that back down, more normal, space that out. And that's where it really clicked for us. Like, hey, it's not only your fruit quality in that, but it's keeping those buds uniformly spaced throughout the tree. And once you run that first hedger pass through, you see it. It really makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Steve. We have a question here about the diameter of the hedger cuts. So I assume that the question referred to what type of wood you are cutting and hedging here.
I don't think I've cut anything too big, but I think that's a good question for the manufacturer because I think it can go through more than what I'm using it for. My cuts are, pretty small because we're cutting out anything, try to cut anything out that's 3/4 of an inch or diameter or more. So, but I think when I first did the tops of some trees, there were some pretty big diameters and it doesn't have any problem. I mean, and I've seen hedgers too, and I've seen the Phil Brown one too, and they're really heavy duty. And I saw one in Italy once, and that hedger was really hipsy, like it's shaped on the tractor. And I have to say, mine's really steady, and I like that. And when you're going through a big branch like that, it's not a problem. But I think that's probably the best question for who you're buying it from to really see what you can cut through.
Laura, but that is mostly when you do it winter pruning. So question for summer, you mostly prune, the shoots, the growing shoots from this season?
Yes. Yep, this summer. And then the winter too, like, that question about asking about going through big branches, it's probably only going to be, the first time I did it, I took it slow. I didn't want to go too deep into the trees, I think the first couple of times you do a winter hedge, trying to get the trees like you want them, probably is the only time you're going to be going through big branches. And then after that, you're probably keeping your branches small.
So we have another question here about what is the tree spacing with M9 in a hedge?
I have my trees like, I think I have some that are 3.5 feet and I have 2.5 feet. I mean, I think that question is because it's a more vigorous rootstock and also depends on your variety. That's kind of where you still have to go in and manage it with your winter pruning. I think it's however you want to make your orchard, really.
My comment there would be is whatever you leave your spacing apart, then to fill your space, you've got to leave, if you leave them farther apart, you got to leave your branches longer. And it doesn't take you very long to figure out that that gets harder to manage. We started out with, 5-foot spacing, then 4-foot spacing. And we very quickly realized that, 3 and just under 3 is a lot easier to manage. And if your soil conditions are so that you can't keep your rootstock contained in a 3-foot or under spacing, you probably need to go to a smaller rootstock.
Yeah, and that's what on those multi-liters that we put in, those were at 4.5-foot spacing. And when we decided that we were going to graft them over, we had struggles filling the spacing. We didn't want to keep those long branches because our fruit was on the end third of that branch. So when we grafted them over, we decided to go multi-liter and keep everything cleared back in towards the center axis.
I would like to add that, this works under the assumption that you really are using sort of more dwarfing rootstocks, and that, part of this summer pruning that you're doing it has to be a complement of the winter pruning. It doesn't completely eliminate everything that you're doing. So if you have really vigorous trees during you have just very vigorous trees, this might not really work out as a way as if you have trees that are controlled at filling up the space and they're not overly vigorous. So we have one more question. I don't know if who of the panelists was to answer this, but it says our orchard is set up with the French access system where the bottom hole comes out 4 feet into the aisle, and above that we practice renewal pruning. Is it advisable to go to a hybrid system? I don't know if Laura, Steve, or Joe, who wants to answer that question.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with big trees or, that wide of a tree. So I don't know if someone else would be better at answering that than me.
Well, we'll leave it there. If somebody wants to reply, you can, send your reply through the chat. I think what we're going to do is it's 12:28 and we still want to cover the topic of irrigation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch topics to irrigation, but just keep asking questions. If we have time at the very end, we're going to go and answer them. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and I want to talk a little bit about the irrigation model in NUA for apples. I know that is one that we have not been using a lot here in Wisconsin, so I just wanted to do sort of like a quick introduction. This is the apple irrigation model in NUA. It was developed by Dr. Alec Laxo at Cornell. And so what this apple irrigation model does, you can find them on NUA on the web browser, but you can also get it through the MaloSim app in your phones. And so what the model, the basis of the model is, it estimates basically how much water your apple orchard is using, and the model is based on a modification of the ET or the Pema-Montiel model. And what this basically measures is how much water your trees are transpiring in addition to how much water is being evaporating from the soil. And so they put it all together, and it refers to your crop, in this case apples, specifically physiological aspects about apple and how apple trees transpire and the number of leaves that they have. And it also adjusts this water use to the phenological stage of your crop. The amount of water that the trees are going to be using in the early spring when there's not a lot of foliage versus the amount of water that they're using in July and in August when you have a lot of leaves is different. So you need to adjust this amount of water to calculate how much you need to replenish if you're irrigating. So that's the basis of the model. What I want to show you here is why I'm showing you irrigation. This is something that we usually don't talk a lot about because we have such wet spring and we usually have a lot of irrigation. But what I have in these two graphs here, you can see the graph on the left. What shows you is the daily water balance. I run this through NUA for our station in the research station at West-Madison. And on the y-axis, you see the daily water use by a mature apple orchard. The parameters that I put in the model was a mature orchard that was planted 3 feet by 12. And so you can see the gallons of water per acre per day that is being used by those trees. It started from May 1st, and I ran it until it was last week, so that was July 12th. And so you can see when the amount of water is over the zero line here, it means that that orchard is receiving more water that it's actually using, that the trees are using. But when you see these negative values here, it means that the trees are using more water than what the system is actually providing. So there's a deficit of water, or there's water coming out of the system that is not being put in back. So if you were to put all of these in a cumulative water balance, all of these days in which you're using more water than the water that you are irrigating, or the precipitation in this case, you can see that the first week of July was a very dry week and very hot, and the trees were transpiring a lot of water taking out of the soil, but we didn't have a lot of precipitation. You can see here from the daily, we had some precipitation here. And so your deficit of water becomes negative. That means that the trees are transpiring and taking out of the orchard a lot of water, and the water is not being replenished, and so the trees are getting stressed. And what you can see here is that by this was July 12th, we had a deficit of about 45,000 gallons of water per acre. That means that we would have needed about 1.5 inches of rain to be able to bring all of that water back to zero, which means is the level in which the amount of water in the soil is full of water, and the trees have plenty of water to be able to use to transpire. So there's no deficit of water. So even though it doesn't happen a lot, there's weeks like this during the growing season that can really affect fruit size. And small periods of water stress during the growing season will accumulate, and you can see substantial difference in fruit size. The other reason why I want to talk about this is because it's also important for newly planted tree, and I've talked about this before, how these newly planted trees that are high density have a very small root system, and so the volume of water that they explore is smaller, and so they tend to, that soil will dry faster, and so during these periods of water deficits, they will get stressed, and we need to irrigate it. And I know we don't have a lot of experience about how to irrigate, and that's why I also want to talk about this with the panelists, but I thought that this was a really interesting model to introduce, because it really, the only thing that requires is to know your type of soil that you have, and also to have a weather station close by where you can run this model. So this is a screenshot of the model, and what I have here is I selected Wisconsin and our weather station at West-Madison, and the information, the input information that you need to run the model is the green tip date, which arbitrarily I put, March 20, and then your spacing, I put a 3x11, and so you also need to add what's the age of your orchard. If you have a mature orchard, your trees are going to be larger, you're going to have more foliage, so the model will adjust that to more or less transpiration or use of water by the trees. You can also select for younger trees, 1-year-old, 2-year-old. There's multiple things that you can select here on the orchard aid. And then you would click here, there will be a button where it says water balance that you could click, and it will run. You can select the day that you want. And so what this is going to give you is going to give you a historical view of how much water was used for about 7 days. And then it would give you here on the beige color, the light brown, it would give you a forecast of how much water your trees will use based on the weather forecast. And so what I want to show you here is that you have the possibility here of adjusting the rainfall as well. This will come automatically as your weather station record rainfall, but you can also change, because in some places, you know, there's very variable precipitation. And so even if you're using a weather station that'd be very close to your orchard, you might still have, you know, a rain gauge, and you might have more accurate measurement for your specific orchard that you can input there. And then you can also here put when you irrigate. So basically what the model was showing here, these are the days in which the model was telling the daily use of water by these trees, and then the cumulative here. And every time that you see this 0 is because there was some precipitation or irrigation event. So there's no deficits of water, because you replenish all the water through irrigation or precipitation. So the model will provide you information on how much water is being used by the trees on the daily basis. And as I said, this is based on a model that uses weather. So temperature, radiation, humidity, and wind speed, all of these are included in the model to predict how much water the trees are using. And we'll also take into account the tree density, the age, and the phenological stage, all of those things to calculate how much water the trees are using. And so the amount of water that the trees will have available, one thing is that the model will tell you how much you're using. But the other piece of the question here is that you need to know how much water you can actually hold in your soil, how much available water there's in your soil. And that will depend on the type of soil that you have. Sandy soils will hold less water than clay soils. So what I have here is a graph that shows basically, depending on the type of soil, from coarse texture to more fine texture, the available water that is in your soil. This is in inches of water per foot of soil depth. And you can see that soils that are heavier soils like clay soil will hold more water than sandy soils. So for 1 foot of soil depth in sandy soils, you have about here 1 inch of water, and 1 inch of water is equivalent to 27,000 gallons per acre of water. But if you have a clay soil, you will be able to hold more water in that soil. It's about 4 times what the sandy soil would hold. So what does this mean? That means that you have an idea of how much water your soil is able to hold. And what we know is that when the soil is full of water, is at its fill capacity, when the trees start using water, the first maybe 10-20% of that water is very easily accessible to the tree. The tree will be able to use it without any problem. But as the soil dries up and we're getting to the bottom of this tank, it's harder and harder for the trees to extract that water. So the question is, when should we irrigate, and how can we use the model to irrigate? So because I was saying before, you can estimate how much water availability your trees will have, your soil will have, you can start using the model. And I want to show here again the output of the model. You can use the model to calculate how much of that total water is being used. So let's say we have a sandy soil. I said a sandy soil will hold about 1 inch of water, so about 27,000 gallons of water per acre. If you run your model, let's say for July 1st, the example that I have here, you can see here that the water balance, the cumulative water balance, shows you that there's a negative about 8,000 gallons of water. So out of those 27, you have already used about 8,000 of them. And so in the case of the model, the recommendation is to use about, maybe 30 to 40% of the available water in your soil. Because if you start using more and you let that tank dry even more, the trees are going to get more and more stressed, because it's going to be harder to use that leftover water. So the idea is to put back that water through irrigation in case you don't have precipitation, when about 30% of that has been lost. So, if you have only 27,000, about 30% of that would be anywhere between 8,000 to 9,000. So you would want to irrigate there. In this case, as I said, this was there's been no precipitation, and you can see how the deficit keep increasing because there was no irrigation, no precipitation, and the temperatures were high and the trees were transpiring a lot of water. So by July 5th, look how negative it's almost all of the water available in a sandy soil would have been used by the tree. The trees would be completely stressed if you would have not irrigated, or there would be no precipitation. So this is more or less how the model works. I would encourage everybody that has a station to use the model, to play with it. As I said, it's available through the NUA website, but you can also get it on your phone, and you can start looking at these values and estimating when would you potentially irrigate. As I said, you want to irrigate when about 30% of the available water in your soil, that will depend on your soil type, has been used, and you want to replenish that so that you have the soil full of water to almost 90% of the amount of water that soil can hold all of the time, to avoid any stress from the trees. So I'm going to stop sharing here, and what I have is a video that is about irrigation, that is more about the irrigation systems more than what I just talked about. I just wanted to use this instance to introduce this model that I think is one of the ones that we've not talked about, and I don't think a lot of the growers are using it, but I wanted to introduce it now. But I'll show a video that Steve Louis recorded. It's sort of a long video. Hopefully we'll have enough time to watch it, and he goes through his entire irrigation setting and how he used it. And then when we have time, I want to answer some more questions about the pruning, and also about irrigation and how to use the model. So I'm going to go ahead and share this irrigation video from Steve, and hopefully we will have no problems with audio. And so here we go.
Hi, I'm Steve Louis with Oakwood Fruit Farm, and just shooting a little video today, just kind of showing you how we go about irrigating our apple trees here. We probably maybe do it a little different than a lot of places. We don't have any big irrigation wells. We're just irrigating off of regular house wells. We've got 4 or 5 wells around the farms at our houses, and we're just running a regular garden hose in. We've got a float in the tanks to fill them up, and then when they get full, automatically shuts them off, so we're not worrying about running them over. So basically, we'll let those fill up in the times when we're not irrigating. Turn them on, in the evening and run, and then shut them off and let them refill. And then, so we were able to buy these tanks used. You can buy new tanks. These are about 4,500 gallon tanks. So off those, then, we're irrigating the different blocks, and we try and break our blocks up so that we're maybe doing a couple thousand trees at a time, so we can get a couple gallons of water on those trees at a time. We try and rotate through if we've got a bigger block, so we're getting water in those trees every 2 or 3 days. Like I say, it's not ideal. If you had a huge irrigation well, you could just turn it on and irrigate everything at once. But we didn't want to have the cost of drilling a well. We'd have to go about 700 feet to go to a well. And this is just kind of using what we have here. And I think a lot of places, smaller orchards could do this real easy, especially if you got a couple tanks like this size where you can fill them up when you're not using them, and then run them in between. Just put a float on them, and then you can fill them up, let them run down. After a little bit, you'll figure out how long you can run them on each zone, and before you can, because you don't want to let your water run out and let your pump run dry. Now this particular place is right here, right next to a building, and we have it. So we have an electric pump hooked up. So we just flip the switch, turn it on, open our valves. Other places we are actually hauling water to them in tanks, and we have gas engine for those. And both of them work really well. They'll keep up. The gas engine, you've just got to watch a little more. Make sure you keep, gas to them. They got about a gallon gas tank on them, so you've got to kind of make sure you babysit that so they don't run out. Some places it works really good because we know we can turn that on, and in a gallon, if we have it figured out right, when it runs out of gas, then the pump just shuts off, and then we don't have to worry about running out of water and burning the pump up. So if you can see what we have here, so we have our valves coming out of the tank. We always put a stop valve on the bottom so we can shut that off. Here we've got 2 sets of tanks that we're using. If one gets low, we can turn it off, or when we're not irrigating, we can shut that off so the water isn't draining into the block. You always have to put a pressure regulator on here so you don't get too much pressure and ruin your emitters in the orchard. And then a filter. It's really important to have a filter on there, so if you get algae buildup or you get anything in there, we're using a disc filter. You can get all these things at any irrigation place. They'll help you get set up so you got the right size pump, the right size emitter. We're using on all ours, we're using about 4/10 of a gallon to 5/10 of a gallon emitter per hour. So basically it's putting half a gallon. And then you can just kind of figure out the number of trees, the number of emitters. We have ours emitters set at 2 feet apart. With the spacing of our trees, that puts an emitter on both sides of every tree. And that, for our soil type, that'll make a spot that's wet, that those 2 zones from those drips get very close. They don't meet, but they get close. So we're getting water, to almost that whole entire root zone. And then a few years back, we changed the ways that we're doing them. When we get over, let's just walk over here. We'll shut the video off. We'll walk over to where our head row lines go into a row, and then we'll start back up. Ready? Can you see in the background here? Here's our tanks. Like I said, in this particular place, we have 2 different sets of tanks, so we can fill one and then irrigate off. If that gets down, we can turn it off and switch to the other one. But then we've got where the 2-inch headline comes from the pump. We've got it buried, so we're not running it over and smashing it. It comes underneath the ground here. It comes over. This is very important. In this box, you need to make sure that we leave a box. And down in this box, you'll see we've got where it comes to a T, but we've got a plug in there. So at the end of the year, we can take that plug out and drain all the water out of the lines. That's really important. So that way, you need to have that in a low spot so your water drains back and you're not breaking your water lines underground. So ours, if we were down there, say 4 feet or 5 feet or whatever, but we're not that deep, so we just put these little plugs in. At the end of the season, take those plugs out, make sure everything's drained out, and then we leave those plugs out till the next spring, and we start everything up. Flush a little water through so we make sure there isn't any debris or anything that's got in there, so we don't plug the emitters. Put that plug back in, and it's ready to go for the year. So then what we do is we've got a 2-inch PVC headline buried all the way along in front of these rows. A couple years ago, we changed how we're doing this. So now this is a 2-inch PVC line that runs along in front of all these rows. So we went to a different style now. So if you can see here, now we've got this little piece here that, so we just drill a hole in here. It's got this 2-piece rubber grommet. You put this rubber in, goes in like this, and then this part goes in. You just drive this little nipple in here, and it's got this bushing. So when you hit this with a rubber mallet, push that in, then you can see down in there, it'll actually squeeze this rubber together, and then so it won't leak there. So it's really super simple. Wherever you want to have a line, one of these lines come up to the rows. On your headline, you just drill these in, push this in, and then you just push this line. So this would be your regular line. You can just run your drip line right down in there if you want. What we do is the part that's underground, we use just plain hose, does not have any emitters. You could run emitters under the ground, won't hurt anything, but we just did to save money. This plain hose with no emitters, and it's cheaper. So that just then, this just pushes on here real easy. You push it over those barbs, and then we put a little hose clamp on there just to make sure that that does not come off. push that up at there, put the hose clamp on there and squeeze it on. And then that comes right up. You can see it comes right up out of the ground here, comes right into our drip line here. And you can see this is our connector. And so anytime we need to splice that piece into that, we have these connectors. They're simple, real simple little connector. Your 2 pieces of that irrigation line slips on here, push it all the way in, and then you just twist this out, and that puts pressure on there and squeezes that on there and holds those together. We have never had one of these ever come apart. They work great. They're super simple and easy. If we ever get a hose in the drip line for any reason, you can just cut it out, put one of these splicers in. It works great. That's how you splice your rolls when you change from run out of one roll of drip line and start a new one. You use these 2. It works super simple. We're just putting ours up on the bottom wire of the trellis here. We use these. These are simple little, we just call them Twisties. We get them, they're super, super cheap. You buy these, and we're just putting this around the irrigation line like this. We put them between every tree, as you can see. Holds that drip line up there. We used to just run it on the ground, but we don't like to do that anymore. 1, it's easier to get in the mower. 2, we've had rodents, rabbits, coyotes, and things like that chewing holes in them, especially on a real dry year. We like to put it up here. It's a lot better up here, out of the way, easy to do. It's also really easy to check make sure it's dripping good. You can drive right through here. You can find a leak. You can make sure it's dripping. Everything is going on really well. And we like a lot. One key thing that we have found out is you want to make sure every little bit of line, you might go every 100 feet or so, or 50 feet. You need to make sure you leave a little. You don't want this line tight. You can put it tight, but then every so often you want to leave a belly in it, because in the winter that hose will contract, and we've had it where it wants to break, pull it off in the ground, or break this coupler. We've never had to pull the hose off, but we've had to break these couplers. So make sure you leave some slack in there for that to contract, because when you're doing it in the warm weather, that hose is longer than what it normally is. When that cools down, we've had some of these that have shrunk as much as 2 and 3 feet in a row. So leave yourself a little belly every once in a while, so that way it can expand and contract. So I'm going to run back over here and turn this on, and then you can see this start back up. So turn everything on here. Make sure you've got your valves open, so places that you want. You can hear your water kind of start to just gravity flow down through there. Got it turned on. Takes a little while to get all out and filled in. This particular block, we're doing about 3,000 trees that we just planted this spring, and it works really well. You can see now. Starting to drip. And you can see here where we've run this. You can see how these 2 drip circles, the wetness is getting where they're just about meeting together. And so that's kind of what you want. If your trees are a little farther apart, you can order this drip line, these emitters, at 2 feet, 3 feet, 18 inches, 4 feet, 6 feet, however you want. You just talk to them. Our trees are planted about 32 inches apart here, and so we really like that 2-foot spacing. Seems to work really well, because in our soils, we're a little heavier soils. That 2 feet seems to be where we're just starting to touch those 2 drip zones together, so we're getting that whole area wet. One thing that we've discovered is you're better off, if you're starting to get dry, run your irrigation sooner rather than wait, because if you wait longer, you'll probably take 2 or 3 days to run this to get it really drip down and get to affect the soil. So you're better off to start running your irrigation a little sooner than you think. If it starts getting dry, start dripping it. We're not using lots of water here, so we might run 2-3 gallons of water on these a day. So, it's not like we're going to, over irrigate stuff. And obviously if you get some rain, and you can kind of tell how things are acting. But we also do on our NUA weather station have a soil moisture probe, and I kind of start watching that to see what the moisture is. We've got a probe in our high density, so we watch that to know when we turn these things on and off. But the lesson I've learned is turn it on sooner rather than later, because there's quite a lag. And now if we had sandy soil, we would probably be able to have to start irrigating even sooner because it dry out faster. So I guess that's just my tips. Again, Steve Louis with Oakwood Fruit Farm, and thank you guys for watching.
All right, so that was Steve's video. Thank you, Steve, for recording that video, and also thank you to Laura and Joe that spend the time recording these videos. I have a question for Steve about the irrigation, and especially about what he talked with the soil moisture probe. We have one question here about being able to use a moisture meter, which I assume is a soil moisture sensor, to determine available water. And Steve just talked about having one connected to his newest station. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you use it?
Yeah, we have, you can buy them right from Rainwise, with the same company that has the web stations, and they hook really easy. I think they're around $90. It's really nice. You put them in, there's no maintenance to them. You don't have to take them out in the winter. There's, you just put them in and leave them. Freezing doesn't affect them. You just kind of put them in the ground and leave them there. And then it measures, and I believe in centibars is what it's measuring. And so from 0 up to, I think, 200 or something, but 0 would be totally saturated. In the last couple of years, with all the rain we've had, there was a lot of times in our clay soils, we were running around, 3 to 10. This year when we started getting those real dry stretches there a couple weeks ago, we've kind of found out in our clay soils, we start looking around 20 to 25 is where we want to start irrigating. I've never found a chart that says if you have this kind of soil, this is where you want to start watering, irrigating. But I think you learn to play with it, and you kind of watch those, and you learn how much water you're putting on, how long it takes you to get water down to that drip zone. I think we've got ours buried at about 15 inches down in, and we put it right in a row of high density.
So just a clarification for those of you that might not be very familiar with the different types of moisture sensors that you can get. So you have sensors that can be used as volumetric, that will measure the volume of water that is in your soil, that will give you a percentage, and it will give you actually, let's say, like a volume of water, and you have to calibrate them. They will depend on the type of soil that you have. So before you install them, either they come calibrated from the manufacturer, or you have to calibrate them with your soil. The ones that Steve was talking about is actually a tensiometer that measures with the strength with which the soil is holding to that water. So the higher the tension means the more effort the plant has to do to be able to extract that water from the soil. So as the tension goes higher, it means there's less water because the plant has to do more effort to take it out. So I think that for NUA, you can have different types of soil sensors in the soil. What I'm not sure with the models that we have here in Wisconsin is if you can have multiple sensors in different blocks, which is a problem if you have an orchard that has different types of soil. So you know that there's some areas where there's more sandy soils or more heavy soils that could affect, because it's not going to be applicable to all of them. The difference with the Apple irrigation model, with this water balance model developed by Dr. Alan Laxo, is that it's looking at what the tree is using and transpiring rather than measuring the soil. So you can use different ways of irrigating by estimating how much the trees are transpiring, or by estimating how the soil is drying with the sensors. So those are two different things. I know that Joe Ferguson, he also recorded a video that we will have it in our website and also in our YouTube channel. We don't have enough time to show you now, but I would like to ask him if we can, share with us a little bit the type of irrigation system that they have and how, if they have any sensors that they're using and how they determine when to irrigate.
Right. We have a few different systems that we run depending on which orchard we're at. The video specifically that I did for WAGA here is in our Lake City orchard, and that's a little different. It's run off a high capacity well, and what it has is a variable speed power output that it controls the amount of flow that goes out to the block. So whereas Steve was saying that you have a pressure relief valve on his pump, ours does it electronically. So it'll notice that if a certain zone is not open, it'll kick down the voltage that's being sent to the pump. So the pump pumps less water, so we don't have any big blow-offs. And then specifically in that orchard, each zone, we run about 10 acres per zone. Each zone has a battery-operated controller that we can set blocks consecutively. So all we have to do is turn on the pump, and then each zone will open at its designated time, run for, mainly those zones run for 4 hours. Same line as Steve has, they run about 4/10 to half-inch gallons per minute or per hour through those blocks, and it just kind of swaps between the zones. Some of our orchards still run off high-capacity wells, but they're controlled all from the well house electronically, so you can set all your timers in one spot. It's a lot easier to manage and control which blocks are running. Specifically for how we go about determining whether we need to irrigate, I think it does take a lot of experience to kind of just get that gauge in your head. The more that you fool around with irrigation, you kind of know when you need to start irrigating. But we have used a new irrigation model quite a bit just to kind of double check where we're at, making sure we keep an eye on our cumulative balance to make sure we're not sinking ourselves in a deficit that we can't climb our way out of. But then we also do run some soil tensiometers, more just to see the specific soil types, how they're reacting. We've kind of got soil types across the board. And Eau Claire is very sandy loam, so we know water pushes through there real quick. So we always have to keep an eye on that orchard specifically, because we can get in that hole pretty quickly, whereas in Galesville or the Minnesota orchards that we have are more of a loam soil, real rich, that it holds its water a lot better. So our irrigation schedule is a lot more spaced out because our water retention is a lot higher.
Thank you, Joe. Laura, I don't know if you would like to share with us, in your case, your irrigation system, on how you use the irrigation system and how you determine when to irrigate. Maybe Laura is not in the call anymore. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. If you have any questions, you can type them now, or it's already past 1 in the afternoon. We want to give this for just an hour. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna end the meeting. But before we end it, I really wanna thank Steve Louis and Laura Tisch and Joe Ferguson for the time of recording these videos and for answering all these questions. This is a new format. I think it's the best that we can do to replace our field day, our summer field day. I know that Anna has already organized some other meetings like this. If you have any feedback that you want to provide us, send us an email or contact Anna. I think this, is a good way of staying connected, of sharing things that are happening now that we cannot see each other in person, and hopefully this will be a way of, as I say, staying connected. And we'll post this on the website. We'll send it through the Wisconsin Fruit News and also our YouTube channel. You will be able to find this webinar and the videos that were recorded by our panelists today, if you want to go back and revisit some of the information. And I just want to thank everybody for attending, and I hope that everybody has a good weekend. And that's it. Bye. Thank you.